The room fell silent when the gavel slammed down. Sharp, it had cut through the heavy air that rested in the bones of those in attendance. Kody Brown's eyes welled up with tears. His hands, so large and strong from years of work, shook ever so slightly. His lips firmed up into a tight line as he struggled to regulate his breathing. This was more than a legal battle. This was the battle for his family, his dignity, and those last broken fragments of the life he knew. The air inside was thick, almost suffocating. It vibrated off the wooden benches, in the still swishing of feet, in the way even the hum of the fluorescent lights was too loud. On the left side of the room, Kody sat at a polished wooden table, a stack of legal documents in front of him, untouched. His suit jacket was perfectly pressed, but his tie was pulled just a fraction too tight, as if it was choking him. He kept his eyes locked on the table, avoiding the glances of those across from him. On the right side were his opponents, the women who once called him husband, women whom he had married, lived with, laughed, and brought up children together. Women whose lives were once intertwined with his, in a way that seemed unbreakable. Yet, here they are, separated not only by more than the aisle of the courtroom. Christine Brown. Christine's eyes were bright, her jaw set, but her hands betrayed her fingers twisting a tissue so it was reduced to a crumpled ball. Her blonde hair framed her face, but today it lacked the warmth it had when she'd smile at Kody over a kitchen table. She didn't want to look at him too long, as though she was in fear that if their eyes met, all the years of rage and pain would pour out altogether. Janelle Brown. Janelle sat beside Christine, serene on the outside but inscrutable. She had always been the practical type, the kind who could conceal her feelings with a level voice. But her gaze flitted to Kody every now and then, not with affection, not even outright anger, but a glance that expressed, "We didn't have to be here." She drummed her pen against her notebook in a slow, steady beat, as if attempting to stay in charge. Meri Brown. Meri sat at the other end, her body straining perfectly erect, as if holding herself together physically would prevent her from falling apart emotionally. Once Kody's sole and only legal wife, she had endured years of stoic heartache. She didn't tap foot, she didn't shift, but occasionally her eyes drifted toward Kody with an expression that bore a lifetime of common history and betrayal. Robyn Brown. Next to Kody was Robyn, the sole wife standing by him. Her dark locks cascaded down her shoulders, and her hands lay lightly on the table, one sometimes reaching out to brush against Kody's arm in a wordless comfort. But her eyes were turbulent. She looked at Christine, then Janelle, then the judge, as if each passing moment in this courtroom was a fight within itself. Behind them, the public seating area was filled with familiar faces, children, now grown or nearly grown, sitting stiffly. Some kept their eyes down, others stared straight ahead with expressions that revealed nothing and everything all at once. In the second row, Aspen, Christine's eldest, sat beside Logan, Janelle's. Both of them would stare at the proceedings, but seemed to have their minds elsewhere, as they remembered when the family didn't need a court to decide what was right. 2 benches behind them sat Aurora, Dayton, and Brianna, Robyn's children, their loyalty to their mother and Kody clear in their quiet presence. Across the aisle, Gwendolyn and Savannah, children of Christine and Janelle, whispered to each other in low voices, their expressions a mix of nervousness and defiance. The judge sat far above them all, impartial man with an unwavering stare that swept through the room. His black robe fell in flawless folds, his hands laying flat on the bench, but his eyes revealed a hint of heaviness. The weight of listening too long to tales of broken vows and shattered families. Court is now in session, his voice rang out, smooth but authoritative. Kody felt his stomach knot. This wasn't reality TV. There were no producers to coach him, no cameras to choose flattering angles. This was raw, unedited life. Every word spoken here would be carved into the record. He looked over at Robyn, who nodded curtly. He swallowed hard and allowed his eyes to wander, for just a second, to Christine, Janelle, and Meri. The women would not look at him. He could almost hear their thoughts, unspoken but stinging. You made your choices, now live with them. The attorneys began shuffling papers, murmuring quietly to their clients. The sound of rustling documents and soft whispers filled the air, underscoring the tension. For a moment, Kody's mind drifted back to the early days in Lehi, Utah, when the family would gather for dinner around a single table, laughter and chaos filling the air. Christine's warm meals, Janelle's steady planning, Meri's watchful eye over the children, Robyn's new energy when she joined the family. It felt like a lifetime ago. Now those memories were specters, and the individuals who had constructed them together were on opposite sides of a courtroom. The bailiff's voice cut through his reverie. All rise for the Honorable Judge Peterson. Everyone rose. The wooden benches groaned under the moving weight. Kody pushed back his chair, attempting to sit up straight, but deep inside, his heart was drumming like a war drum. The judge sat down, gesturing for everyone else to sit as well. Papers rustled again. A pen clicked twice. Even the faintest sounds were ear-shattering in the silence. As the formalities began, Kody found himself staring at Christine. She looked determined, but there was something in her eyes. Not hatred, not even pure anger, but deep sadness. He knew that look. He had seen it once before, on the day she told him she was leaving. He shifted his gaze to Janelle. She was focused on her attorney, occasionally jotting down notes. She didn't even glance at him. That stung more than he expected. Then Meri. She met his eyes for a brief second. It was like looking into a mirror that reflected every mistake he had made in their marriage. She quickly turned away. And finally Robyn. Her hand found his under the table, squeezing lightly, as if to say, "I'm here. I'm still here." The judge cleared his throat. "We are here today to address matters of property division, financial responsibility, and related claims arising from the separation of the Brown family." The words sounded clinical, but to Kody they weren't. This wasn't quantity on paper. It was about decades of existence, memories, and the love that had once bound them all together. He could sense the gaze of his children over his shoulder. Some of them stood behind him, some of them did not, but they were all here, witness to a moment that would reshape their family for all time. In that instant, Kody realized something. This courtroom wasn't just the place where the law would decide their fate. It was the place where every wound, every unspoken resentment, every buried truth would be dragged into the light. The cameras weren't rolling. There was no TLC crew, no retakes, no editing. This was real life. And the stakes, higher than anything Kody had ever faced before. I can continue section 2 next, with equal depth, so the entire story flows seamlessly toward your 900-word version, but now with full rich expansions for YouTube drama. Before the courtroom, before the legal arguments, there was love, complicated love, unconventional love, but love nonetheless. Years ago, the Brown family was not a group of independent households. They were a family. The television show Sister Wives brought us Kody Brown, a man with one legal wife, 3 spiritual wives, and a vision of raising a big tight-knit family under one faith. The early days, it was a sort of harmony that only they could comprehend. Kody with his energetic smile, bouncing from house to house, always talking about unity, always envisioning a future where every child would feel loved equally. Meri was his first love, young, hopeful, and deeply committed. She believed in Kody's vision without question. She stood by him as he brought Janelle into the family, and later Christine. Each time she told herself, "Love grows when you share it." Janelle brought stability. She was a pragmatist, a down-to-earth person, the kind of woman who could stretch a dollar and maintain order amidst the mess. She wasn't easily swept away by emotion, but she did believe in the dream of the family. Christine was the warmth. She prepared meals for the kids, maintained traditions, and brought laughter into the mix. She was the glue that was motherly, the kind of glue that made the family feel like home. Years later, Robyn arrived, younger, bringing with her 3 children from a previous marriage. She was emotional, openly affectionate, and Kody fell for her hard. When he legally married Robyn so he could adopt her children, the dynamic shifted in ways no one wanted to admit. The cracks began to show. At first, the small changes didn't seem like much. Kody spending more time with one wife than the others, certain conversations turning into arguments, the kids noticing which households got more visits. Then came the bigger issues: money, time, attention. The Browns moved states, bought property, and dreamed of building multiple houses close together. But dreams are expensive, and reality is unforgiving. Christine felt invisible. Janelle began wondering if Kody's choices were for the family or for him. Meri distanced herself after a pattern of personal betrayals. Robyn, in an effort to maintain the family, found herself in the middle of loyalty to Kody and increasing resentment from the others. The breaking point. The COVID-19 pandemic pushed everything to the edge. Disagreements about safety rules tore through the family. Kody's strict guidelines caused rifts, especially with adult children who felt isolated from him. Christine was the first to make the life-changing decision. "I can't do this anymore," she told him one night, her voice shaking. "I can't keep loving someone who doesn't see me." When she left, it was like a domino effect. Janelle followed months later, tired of what she called emotional neglect. Even Meri, who had stayed through years of heartache, finally admitted their marriage was over. Robyn was the only one who stayed, but even she couldn't shield Kody from what came next. From personal to legal, family conflicts are complicated, but when they involve property and finances, the conflicts usually make it to court. There were issues of land in Coyote Pass, joint bank accounts, and debt. Who was entitled to what? Who should retain what assets? And what of the years of financial contributions by wives who had since walked out? The private disagreements spilled into public records. And now, instead of sitting around a dinner table trying to work things out, the Browns were sitting across from each other, in a courtroom, each with their own lawyer, their own strategy, and their own version of the truth. Why this day mattered for Kody. This wasn't just about money or land. It was about his legacy. He had built this family. At least he believed he had. And now it was being taken apart, piece by piece, in front of a judge. For Christine, Janelle, and Meri, it wasn't revenge. It was justice. It was taking back what they had invested. It was putting legal closure to years of emotional war. And for the kids, this was the day their parents' story officially became one of separate lives, not one big family. The voice of the judge snapped everyone back to the present. We will now hear opening statements. Section 3 would begin with Kody standing, his heart pounding, knowing that whatever he said next could define the rest of his life. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked toward Kody's table. "Mr. Brown, you may speak." For a moment, Kody did not budge. His fingers tapped softly against the rim of the table, his mind spinning. He felt the hot burden of dozens of pairs of eyes upon him. His wives, his children, the court personnel, and the unobtrusive presence of the judge, who would determine so much of his destiny. Under the table, Robyn squeezed his hand. He rose. The scrape of his chair against the floor reverberated throughout the court. He made his way slowly to the middle, documents in hand, but did not glance down at them. He was certain this needed to come from the heart. Kody's opening statement. He did shake at first, but his voice steadied. "I'm not here to ruin anybody. I'm not here to smear the mothers of my children. I'm here because I feel like I deserve to be treated fairly. For more than 20 years, I was living my life around this family. I worked, I supported, I sacrificed. Every choice I made, good or bad, I thought was for the benefit of all of us." He paused, his eyes moving from Meri, to Janelle, to Christine. "I know I've made mistakes. I know I wasn't the perfect husband. But I was there. I was present. I put food on the table, roofs over heads. I gave my energy, my faith, my heart to all of you." Christine's gaze didn't falter. Janelle's expression stayed neutral. Meri looked down at her lap. Kody took a breath. "This isn't just about property. This is about decades of shared life. And I'm asking the court to see that while marriages have ended, my role, my contributions, can't just be erased because feelings have changed." Christine's attorney steps. "In your honor," Christine's lawyer said, rising smoothly, "my client isn't here to erase Mr. Brown's contributions. She's here because promises were broken, not once, but repeatedly. Because she had been supporting him, not only emotionally, but financially for years. And when she decided to leave, she went with nothing but her own clothes, and the hope that she could begin fresh. She wants what's fair, for herself, for her children, and for the years she expended in a relationship that no longer is." The lawyer's voice did not waver, yet each word struck like a hammer. The courtroom responds. Kody's jaw clenched. Promises were broken. the words echoed in his ears. He wanted to tell the judge about the nights he stayed up worrying about bills, about being the public face of their family, about the criticism he bore from strangers. That was not how it was done in court. Emotion alone would not suffice. Every claim had to be wrapped in evidence, not feelings. The children in the back row shifted uncomfortably. Aurora squeezed her mother Robyn's arm. Gwendolyn crossed her arms, her face unreadable. Testimonies begin. The judge signaled for the first witness, a financial advisor who had worked with the Browns. They spoke in numbers, incomes, expenses, property values, cold facts that stripped the warmth from years of shared life. Next was something Kody had not anticipated, a personal statement from one of his older kids. They were sworn in by the bailiff and made their way to the stand, heads down. Their voice trembled. "Dad, I just wanted you to be there. Not for the cameras, not for the show, for me." "We all did." A lump formed in Kody's throat. His eyes burned. He wanted to speak, to apologize right there. But he could only sit and listen as the truth came out, piece by painful piece. The judge nodded solemnly, making notes. "We will continue with further testimonies after the recess." Kody sat back in his chair, gazing at the ceiling for an instant, fighting not to shatter. He knew this was only the start. The worst words were yet to come. The judge came back from recess, and the low hum in the courtroom ceased at once. Everyone rose as he sat down. When they resumed their seats, the atmosphere became more oppressive, as if the previous testimonies had sucked all the oxygen out of the room. Kody sat stiffly in his chair, hands clenched tightly in front of him. His knuckles were pale. Robyn whispered something to him, but he didn't react. His mind kept going back to his child's words hours before, repeating them over and over. "Dad, I just wanted you to be there." The next witness, Christine, was summoned to the stand. She stood slowly, each movement measured, as if mustering strength with each step. She wore no anger on her face, only sadness, and something else, resignation. The bailiff swore her in, and she sat down. The lawyer's first question was soft. "Christine, why did you choose to leave the marriage?" She glanced at Kody for a split second, before returning her attention to the attorney. "I left because I felt isolated," she whispered. "I had people around me, but I was still isolated. I tried to communicate with him. I tried for years, but I was invisible. The only times I experienced his energy, his attention, were when it was focused somewhere else, on someone else." Robyn shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her lips compressing into a thin line. Kody's jaw clenched. Christine's voice cracked. "I did not want my kids to believe that that was what love was. I did not want them to think it was okay to be an afterthought in your own marriage." The courtroom held its breath. The judge's pen hung suspended mid-note. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to dissipate. "Janelle speaks." Janelle was next. Her testimony was calmer, more measured, but the weight of her words was just as heavy. "I stayed because I believed in the family's dream. I thought, maybe if I worked harder, if I was patient, things would even out, but they didn't. In the end, I realized I was working for something that no longer existed." She barely looked at Kody. "I didn't want to go to court, but here we are." Meri's quiet truth. Meri was called last of the wives. She went to the stand without a glance at anyone. Her voice was subdued, hardly above a whisper, but each word delivered decades of pain. "I was the first. I believed in him more than I believed in myself. And somewhere along the way, I stopped existing in his eyes. I stayed longer than I should have, hoping for something to change. But the truth is, I was alone long before I left." Kody's gaze dropped to the table. His throat ached. The emotional collapse. As Meri stepped down from the stand, the judge called for a short break. The room relaxed slightly, people shifting in their seats, stretching legs. But Kody didn't move. His head was bowed, his hands pressed against his forehead. Robyn rubbed his back, her other hand gripping his tightly. And then, he broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, but in the quietest, most human way possible. His shoulders shook, his breath caught, and a single tear slid down his cheek. He wasn't just hearing legal testimony. He was hearing the story of his life told by the people who had lived it with him. And their version was full of hurt he hadn't let himself see. Christine watched him, her own eyes wet. For a brief moment, there was no bitterness. Just two people who once loved each other,
acknowledging that love was now gone. The silence was so deep it felt sacred. No one spoke. No one dared to. This was no longer just a case about property and money. It was the funeral of a family, and everyone in that room was mourning in their own way. The bailiff's voice rang out. All rise. Everyone stood as Judge Peterson returned to his seat, the finality in his steps making Kody's chest tighten. This was it. Months of filings, hours of testimony, a lifetime of memories, all coming down to this moment. The judge opened a folder, his glasses sliding slightly down his nose. His eyes swept across the room, pausing briefly on Kody, then on each of the women seated opposite him. This court has reviewed all testimony, evidence and relevant documentation. We will now render judgment. The verdict. His voice was steady, professional, but every sentence felt like a stone dropping into water, rippling out to everyone present. The Coyote Pass land would be divided equally among all parties with legal claims. Certain properties would be sold, and the proceeds split based on documented contributions. Joint bank accounts would be closed, funds distributed according to the financial records provided. Kody would retain ownership of the home he currently shares with Robyn, but would be required to buy out any shared equity claimed by the other wives. It wasn't a clean win for anyone. It wasn't a total loss for anyone either. It was the end. The silence after Kody's ears rang. He barely heard the shuffle of papers, the clicking of pens, the low voices of attorneys confirming details. He just stared at the judge's bench, his hands gripping the edge of the table. Across the room, Christine exhaled slowly, as if releasing years of tension in one breath. Janelle's expression softened, but only slightly. Meri sat perfectly still, her hands folded neatly, her gaze fixed on nothing in particular. Robyn leaned closer to Kody. It's over, she whispered, but her voice carried no triumph, only exhaustion. One last look. As the judge adjourned the case, people began to file out.
Jeepers slid into briefcases, heels clicked against the tile floor. The family that had once been united by faith and love was now scattering like pieces of a puzzle that would never fit together again. Kody stood slowly, his movements heavy. For the first time that day, he turned fully toward Christine, Janelle, and Meri. No words passed between them, just a look. In that look was everything. The joy they once had, the pain they had endured, the choices they made, and the fact that there was no going back. The world outside. When Kody stepped through the courthouse doors, the sunlight hit him like a spotlight. Reporters waited nearby, their cameras ready, voices calling out questions. But for once, Kody didn't stop to talk. He walked past them all, his eyes fixed on the parking lot, his thoughts somewhere far away. Robyn kept pace beside him, her hand lightly touching his arm. Behind them, the other wives emerged, each going their separate ways, without a single word exchanged. The final thought that evening. Kody sat by himself in his living room, the documents from court laid out on the coffee table. He read them, not because he had to. His attorney had done a good enough job of explaining everything to him, but because he wanted to read the words for himself. He knew something in that still moment. The hardest battles aren't fought in courtrooms. They're fought in the heart, in the moments you can't change, the words you can't take back, and the people you lose along the way. The gavel had ended the case, but it hadn't healed the wounds, and maybe it never would. Final closing line for YouTube Impact. This wasn't the end of their tale, but it was the day their family changed forever.